Hello, everyone, and welcome to Making the Shift. Today, we are so fortunate to have our friend and colleague, SLP Cari Ebert here. You guys know her for her incredible seminars, books, products, just that you got a lot going on, a lot to be known for.
Absolutely.
And we are just so honored to have you here today, and we have been friends with Cari for a few years. I remember actually the first time I found you on social media, and I was like shocked because I found your page and I was like, I say these exact things. Oh my God, like I'm you. And I sent you a video, I think.
You did. And I was so tickled because I was new to Instagram. I didn't even know what the heck I was doing. And you like sent me an audio, like an actual message. And I was like, how do I do this? And it was, you were sitting on a park bench and you were like recording yourself. And I was like, well, this is the coolest person ever. So it was just so neat. So I started following you and it was neat. So we've never met in person yet. Never met in person yet. We're Insta friends.
Sometime soon.
That will happen. Absolutely.
It will.
Yeah, it's just been so awesome getting to know you. And we really wanted you to come on today to really be able to share your experience, not only as an incredible SLP, but also parent of an autistic child, and kind of how you have integrated those two parts of your life together. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you guys for asking me to participate. I'm honored, and I'm excited to share a little bit of my journey and growth over the past couple decades.
Right. Absolutely. Before we jump into the topic, I have a quick question.
Okay.
When I was growing up, my favorite TV show was called Siskel and Ebert. And I need to know this. Were you related?
I know. I love it. People, when I first got married and became an Ebert, everybody's like, are you related to like Roger Ebert, the movie critic? And we are not. I have checked all of my husband's like family lineage. We have no relation, but everybody remembers the name. When I say Ebert, they're like, oh, I've heard that name before.
That was my show. Like, it's still till this day. You can ask Jesse, like, before we watch a Netflix show or a movie, I'm on Rotten Tomatoes, like finding out what the audience is saying. And that's kind of how I guide my decisions.
I love it. I love it. Excellent.
So jumping into our tonight to the show's topic, I would like, I guess, to kind of talk a little bit about, where historically you come from, the perspective of the role at the IEP table, in all settings, right? From the parent perspective, so let's start back historically, where things were.
Yeah. So my son, Aaron, is 18 years old. He's a senior in high school, blows my mind. Just got his senior pictures back today. And I'm just reeling with emotion. So back in 2007, when Aaron was first diagnosed, he got a provisional diagnosis of autism from his pediatrician before he went and got that formal, diagnosis. And so he was 2.5 years old. And in 2007, autism was very much considered a tragedy. And so as an early intervention SLP, I was working with the birth to 3 population, going into the families' homes. I was often the first person to talk about, I can't even believe I used to say these words, red flags of autism, right? So for me then to have a son who is, and we used to say, who had autism back then, it was so much for me to deal with that what I did is I just didn't. I denied it, even though I had this provisional diagnosis. And I can remember coming home from work and thinking, well, he does have an ear infection right now. That's probably why he's not responding to his name. So what I started doing was justifying, the reason he wants to stand and flip the light switch on and off 200 times in a row is because we just moved into this house and he couldn't reach the light switch at the last house. And so I can remember trying to justify his developmental concerns with, these rationalizations, because back then to have an autistic child, it was considered very tragic. And the only recommendation back then was 40 hours a week of ABA, intensive behavior therapy, which I, at the time, didn't align with in my practice. I've always been very much a relationship-based provider. And so even back then, before there was any such thing as neurodiversity affirming services or anything, I was not aligning with what the current trend was was, for autism treatment. Please understand, back then, Autism Speaks was very much looking for a cure. I mean, they were absolutely spending millions and millions of dollars looking for a cure. So when I graduated with my master's in 1995, the DSM-4 had just been released in 1994. And the DSM-4 was the one, do you remember, it had 5 subtypes of autism? It had Asperger's, it had PDD-NOS. Remember PDD-NOS? That was the diagnosis, like the catch-all, like you're not autistic enough, but you're quirky as all get out. So we're going to throw you into this catch-all, pervasive developmental disorder, not otherwise specified. And then there was autistic disorder, and then there was Rett. There were 5 different subtypes. Well, then when the DSM-5 came out in 2013, they said, no, it's one spectrum. So everything has changed. Like, just for me professionally, being trained under the DSM-4 criteria, and then in 2013, having to switch to the DSM-5 criteria. And my whole understanding of what my role is as a speech-language pathologist in supporting autistic kids, it has shifted so much. And I have to say, the pandemic hit in 2020, right? And as a professional speaker, I was unemployed, like instantly. I was in Fresno, California on March 5th, 2020. And I had no idea at the time that was my last in-person training for 570 days. 570 days.
Gosh,
I was unemployed. Isn't that crazy? So when I was there, so when I came home, the silver lining to the pandemic for me was I didn't work for a year and a half. I started doing a few webinars, toward the end of 2020, but I was basically unemployed. So what I did is I got on social media and I started following every autistic person that I could possibly find. And I am telling you, it was the most unreal growth for me professionally and personally. I have shifted making the shift, right? I mean, you guys, I can't even tell you how much I have changed in the language that I use, in what it has done to me to become neurodiversity affirming. I spent that year and a half writing my autism program for birth to 3 providers for early intervention. I went back and started redoing all of my handouts to make sure they were neurodiversity affirming. And I'm talking about my apraxia handouts. I'm an apraxia specialist too. And so I had to go in because with toddlers, it can be difficult to weed out, is this autism or is this apraxia? Because there's a lot of overlapping traits in 2-year-olds, in these very young children. So I had to go through and rework all my apraxia handouts and make those neurodiversity affirming. So it has been, I don't even know. When I first became a professional speaker in 2009, I didn't even talk about having an autistic son. I wasn't there yet. I never brought it up. I was an apraxia specialist, and that's all I talked about as I traveled around the country. And then I guess I just had a point in my life where I realized my journey might matter to someone else, right? That my experiences, our family's experiences, might end up helping other families and therefore helping other children. And so I finally started talking about the fact that I had an autistic son, and it blew everyone's mind and it wasn't that I was hiding it. It just, for me personally, I wasn't at a place where I felt like I could just talk about it, with random people. So it's been quite a journey for me over the last 18 years.
I love that. And it's like taking the past experiences and using that as an academy to continue the growth. And I've been watching all your stuff with Aaron on social media and just seeing the way that you work with the support is just phenomenal, because it just helps so many. Yeah, absolutely.
It's really the neat thing about the world we live in today, right? We live in the digital age, and you think about how amazing it is that you and I can be friends and we've never met each other, right? That we are able to support families in Ireland, professionals in Australia. You think about just the magnitude of reach that we have living and working in the digital age. And I think when Aaron was younger, how much better my mental health would have been if I would have had supports. Because I'll be honest with you, as a parent, I pretty much felt like it was just me. I was the only one that this was I didn't know how to connect with other families. It wasn't easy to do. And so I just think how crazy amazing is this world that we live in, that if you want to learn about Gestalt language processors, or you want to learn about sensory, or you want to learn about apraxia or autism or neurodiversity affirming, you can literally get out your device and you can find the most amazingly authentic people who just are driven to share in an effort to support others. And I just think there's so much beauty in that.
Oh, I totally agree on that. I was thinking back on my childhood and just the lack of being able to reach out with social media, and the resources were real limited, and the knowledge and the information that we had, and the doctors not really having any information. And, honestly, thinking about even media, it's like watching TV shows like Leave It to Beaver, where, a child has like a difficult problem and it's resolved in 20 seconds.
Yeah, exactly.
Like everybody sits at the dinner table and they all have these huge smiles and they're like, I'm eating all my food. And it's like, okay, this is not reality. It's making, know what I mean?
I'm glad you say that. That reminds me, because I always talk to parents in our program about like leaving those expectations behind, because we have these ideas of, oh, we're gonna have dinner together and everyone's gonna be happy, and then we're gonna play a board game, and it's like it never goes.
If I could even tell you guys that Jim and I, my husband and I, sometimes talk about how the stress around mealtime, because Aaron is, I now call him a safe eater. He was always more than a picky eater. I, for a while, used the term resistant eater, but he was very much, he's got a lot of sensory processing differences. And so mealtime has always been very stressful. And I had it in my head that, darn it, he's going to sit at this table and he's going to eat with the family. And so after working all day, I'd come home, and the stress around mealtime, the epic meltdowns. And I look back and I think, it's too bad I had it in my head that mealtime had to be a certain way. So when I talk now about meeting the child where they're at, about honoring, their sensory preferences, their sensory needs, about honoring autistic joy. I mean, I just have so many like one-liners now that I use that I think I didn't practice them because I didn't have anybody guiding me. You know what I mean? I had raised two neurotypical daughters. And so I thought I knew how to parent. And then I had an autistic child, and everything I thought I knew about parenting was literally because his sensory needs, and nobody, Jesse, nobody talked about sensory back then. Nobody, like, it just wasn't even a thing, right? Our OTs, a few of them had some sensory knowledge, but like when my son was diagnosed, all the supports we got, I always joke, I was like, all they cared about, those early intervention providers, was Aaron had to play appropriately with the Fisher-Price barn and all the damn animals, pardon my French. But I'm like, Aaron could have cared less about the Fisher-Price barn, but darn it, at 2 years old, you had to make the animals walk and make them eat. And if you were lining up the animals, or if you were showing no interest in the animals, then we have a problem. Right? So that kind of appropriate play, age appropriate play. And gosh, I look at where we are now. And that's why every social media post I do about neurodiversity affirming services is about, I always say, whether it's an IEP or an IFSP, what does the I stand for? Individualized. And yet I see us pulling from banks of goals and trying to do the same types of therapy activities with every child or student. And I'm like, nothing about that is going to be neurodiversity affirming, right? You better know what gives every autistic child their brain tingles. And if you don't know what gives them their brain tingles, if you don't know what their interests are, if you don't know what their strengths are, what their passions are, what their fascinations are, if you don't know what their sensory needs are, if you don't provide unrestricted access to multimodal communication, you are not providing neurodiversity affirming services, right? So it's not about like teaching to the test and can he stack 4 blocks and can he label 5 animals in less than 20 seconds, like that kind of stuff that we test, as SLPs when we take your language test. I'm just like, there is nothing, nothing about that is functional, nothing whatsoever. And can I tell you, and listen to me, I'm just rambling, but can I tell you one of the coolest things I've learned by listening to actually autistic voices is this: the autistic profile, okay, in young children, the way they meet their developmental milestones, they have a spiky profile. And I love that term, that it is spiky. I used to say they had scattered skills, right? That was always the term I used when I would write reports, but I love this idea of a spiky developmental profile. My son, Aaron, was reading. He was spelling and reading by 2.5. I just did a post on this a couple days ago. He was spelling long words like observatory and astronaut. Now he had no idea what they meant. Okay. But he was spelling words. He was drawn to words, and he was echoing, and using echolele and repeating long strings of words, but he had no, at the time, what we would say functional communication, right? He wasn't saying mama or help me or milk, right? I mean, he just wasn't doing that. So as an SLP, I felt like I was failing my own child, like how, because I didn't know anything about how autistic children develop language, right? We were taught as SLPs, at least when I was in grad school, that echolalia was pathologic, that you needed to extinguish it, right? So,
Right.
gosh, I look where we are in 2023. Can't believe it's 2023 now, as Aaron is a senior in high school. And I think, wow, what a journey. And look how far we've come, but we have so much further to go. So much further to go.
Were there any like moments you could think of that was like a specific moment in time where you're like, man, I wish I knew this, or like, I wish I knew this sooner, or like
Yeah.
some big aha moment that you had where it like all made sense?
I will tell you, I think that when people ask me, like, if you had one piece of advice for other parents of, autistic children, and this is, and I actually put this in like my kind of dedication in my autism book, but the thing, and this has probably been about, I'm going to say 4 or 5 years that I've been saying this is my mantra. And if I can share anything with parents, it's this: forward is forward, no matter the speed. And that goes against everything that we were taught as SLPs, because we were taught you got to give standardized tests, you got to see what their deficits are, then you need to teach to the test. So when you give them that test again in 6 months, that it shows progress. And when you have a spiky developmental profile, progress is not like this. It will never be like this. And so for me, it was this whole thought of, you know what? It doesn't matter when Aaron potty trains. It only matters that Aaron potty trains. And if he doesn't, that we have a way to meet his toileting needs, right? It doesn't matter when Aaron, can eat with a fork, right? I mean, it's this whole idea, because there were all these expectations, these milestone charts the pediatrician would bring out, all the therapists would bring out. And here's my kid all over the place, right? With all these milestones. Well, he's still like that. I mean, I asked him the other day, I said, buddy, are you ever going to drive a car? And he thought about it and he goes, maybe when I'm 25. I'm like, all right, cool. So I'll ask you when you're 25, he's 18. So he knows he's an adult now. And so, legally. And he said, so mom, I'm an adult, but I don't have to buy my own house, do I? Like, no, dude, if you want to live with us, you can. And I'm like, how funny to me that he like lays awake at night thinking, crap, do I have to go buy a house? Because he said, that sounds like a lot of work. I said, dude, it is a lot of work.
Yeah.
I wish we had that option.
What goes through his brain, because he knows he's legally an adult now. So we're getting ready for, a major transition with having a senior in high school. But gosh, I just think I've started really allowing myself as a parent, forget the SLP in me, but as a parent, to kind of go back and, I don't know, process and deal with the emotions of all those years, because I will tell you, I just don't think I dealt with it. As a parent, I one thing that I've really started reiterating a lot in my autism course is that in order to be neurodiversity informed as a provider, that means you're trauma informed. You must be, right? Those two things are connected. You can't say that I'm one and not the other. So those two things go together. And I will just say that as a parent, I'm not sure our emotional needs ever really get addressed or dealt with, because you've got this child with a disability and now you have to go all in, making sure they are, supported at school, and that you're, and I just have, horror stories and good stories too, but things that I was just trying to make sure that his basic human rights were not being violated, when he was non-speaking, especially. And I just am not sure. Thank goodness, my husband and I have a really strong relationship. A lot of times that gets torn apart, in all of that emotional chaos that happens once a diagnosis is given. But I will say, my husband and I spend a lot of time drinking wine and really almost kind of going back and going, do you remember when? And can you believe how we made it through that? And, just sort of dealing with it now after the fact. And so it's pretty fascinating. My mother-in-law just gave us our tape of our wedding, and like she had it transferred from like a VHS tape to a DVD, and she gave it to us for Christmas. So we watched it last night with Aaron. The quality was horrible. It was so ridiculous. And oh my, it was so 90s. I can't even tell you, but Aaron watched with us and he was just amazed, at everything. And he's like, so I wasn't here yet. So it was just interesting having him even, and be able to participate in that conversation. It's just really been, I don't know, everything about him amazes me. When he was 3, 4, or 5, I wasn't sure if he would ever, speak. And it was one last thing, back then, AAC, augmentative and alternative communication, was considered a last resort. There was absolutely everything was make him talk. He needs to talk. We have to get him talking. So that's why all of us who are neurodiversity affirming really have this big push to honor all forms of communication, right? That mouth words are not somehow more important or more valuable than other forms of language. And so I always say this: language trumps speech, right? The goal is communication, right? SLPs, the goal is communication. The goal is not speech. And so I think that is a message I hope they're starting to send to grad students, SLP grad students, because I certainly was not trained that way.
Right. I think that's an effective approach too, even in the IEP, when it comes to the accommodations. Back to what you were saying earlier on, really emphasizing the I, individualizing it. And what we see all too often is on the accommodations, it says preferential seating and extended time on test. And you're like, wow, that's really individualized.
Yeah.
Out on an IEP in America.
Exactly.
So like really reframing that to say, hey, you know what, maybe some accommodations on working with autistic students and saying, hey, you know what, having access to multimodal communication would really be helpful.
Yeah. And when we say, modifications and accommodations, what kind? Because there should be sensory, there should be executive function, there should, you know what I mean? We have to get specific about, and I always say this, every IEP, every IFSP goal, everything we work on should basically be focused on just a few things: communication, getting their sensory needs met for self-regulation. Self-advocacy should be a major goal for everybody, for, regardless of age. And then executive function support, so it's really about, creating modifications and accommodations that support the neurodivergent student and the way they learn, right? It's not about fixing the kid. See, when my son was diagnosed, it was about fixing the kid because the kid was clearly broken. And so here I go getting all passionate, but this is what I always say: is my son is not a broken or disordered version of a neurotypical child. Okay. He is simply wired differently. Right. So it's not that he's broken. So I don't need some professional to come in and fix him. I don't even fix his deficits. What I need you to do is figure out what his strengths are. I need you to figure out how he learns. And then I would like it if you teach the way that he learns. Right. That is what a free and appropriate education means, is you need to teach the way he learns, right? Because he doesn't learn the way neurotypical children do. And so I am an autism consultant for several school districts around the country now. And one of the things that I am starting to find is that we, as a collective whole, do not yet know how to educate autistic students. I think that the majority of school districts are confused because they are just saying, oh, well, let's just pull them out and put them in a self-contained classroom and provide preferential seating or whatever. And we're going to call that good. You're not meeting their sensory needs. You're not providing, executive function modifications and, all those things. I'm like, I'm not seeing that we're doing anything. And then guess what? All the autistic students end up being behavior disordered, because if you don't meet their needs and don't give them a way to communicate, they're going to have challenging behaviors. But that's our problem, not their problem.
We talk about that all the time. And then just as you're saying that, makes me think of, I feel like one of the things we hear most from parents is just the worrying about the future.
Yep.
You know, it's always like, what's going to happen when?
Yes. Can I tell you what I say when a parent asks me about the future? Because for your listeners to know, one of the things that we lose sleep over at night, parents of children with disabilities, is who's going to take care of them when I die. And I know that sounds very morbid, but as a breast cancer survivor, I was very close to that. And that was something that I really struggled with when I was diagnosed 10 years ago, because I thought nobody can take care of my son like I can, right? But when parents ask me, so there are very real things that we have to deal with. And Jim and I are on this mission to become as healthy as we possibly can, because our goal is to live as long as we can. You know what I mean? For Aaron, for our other children too, but Aaron needs us so much, and so we are on this mission. But when parents ask me and start talking about the future, like, oh, I have this 3-year-old, I wonder if he'll ever live on his own. I wonder if he'll go to college. I wonder if he'll get a job. What I always say to parents is, when we talk about the future, when we start thinking about, goals and programming, autism programming, when we talk about the future, we want to think about the next 6 months, because that's the only thing we can control is what's happening in the next 6 months. Because if somebody would have decided my son's future, at 18 when he was 3, I'm telling you, they would have missed it by a mile, So when we think about the future, we're just going to think about 6 months. And that's how Jim and I really keep our sanity, is instead of worrying about what are we going to do? What if Aaron can't get a job? What if we worry about what are we doing in the next 6 months? So right now, we are about 5 months away from graduation. Our daughter gets married in June. So we've got graduation in May, wedding in June, and that's as far as we're planning for now. And I'm telling you, it's just a really healthy way. I'm not saying we ignore, the far down the road future, but I'm just saying it's easier when you take it 6 months at a time. It's more manageable.
And I think another benefit of that is it helps you to focus on the tactical, what can we do right now, instead of like looking at those big picture goals. You're looking at but what can we do right now?
Absolutely.
Forward is forward,
That's right. That's right. And you get those actionable steps that can actually be met. And it's important, and it's good for your mental health, because if you worry about things, what's going to happen in 10 years, you can't control what's going to happen in 10 years. Right. So, yeah. So that's where we're at. But yeah, autism is something that I can now say I have an autistic son. I can say my son, is disabled. I have a disabled son. And I'm telling you, those are words that I never thought I would say, because when he was diagnosed, it was hush hush. And remember back in the day, because I'm much older, there was a time when I was in grad school, we learned that they used to think that autism was caused by refrigerator mothers, blame poor mom for not loving their baby enough. Well, we know, okay, so it's not refrigerator mothers. Well, when Aaron was diagnosed, it was vaccines all the way. So I was being shunned for vaccinating my son because I caused his autism. So how grateful are we now that we finally are done with pseudoscience, right? And we're saying kids you don't get autism, right? A child is born autistic because it's in their genetic makeup. I mean, it's not something you cause. And so for me, that was almost a relief, because I can't tell you how long I thought, what did I do wrong? You know what I mean? When I was pregnant with him, what did I do? Because everybody blames mom, for doing something. And so that was important for me to be able to say nothing caused his autism, and also to get people to recognize that you don't need to apologize that my son is autistic, right? Don't be sorry. He's not a mistake. He's not broken, right? So, and he's not an optional member of society. So we better figure out autism acceptance and start practicing it.
I think that's huge. I mean, we talk a lot about, and we emphasize on the trauma-informed practices and care with focus on the clients and students, but also looking at a holistic view of the families. And I think that what you're mentioning right now of coming to recognizing that trauma, but part of that being, hey, you know what, it's a different neurotype. We're in a place now where we're slowly reducing the stigma, and all of that is in turn creating healing in a way.
Is. Oh, and it is, Chris. I mean, it is so healing. And I just feel like as a professional speaker, now that I can talk about my journey, as an SLP who has an autistic child, it has been so cathartic for me. I mean, I can actually say things now that, even 5, 7, 10 years ago, nobody even knew. Nobody professionally even knew that I had an autistic son, because it was still so stigmatizing, right? And it was, and I'm just so grateful now that, that it's something that we can talk about. And that's why I'm so vocal on social media. I guess not vocal. I don't do enough videos, but I do my little posts on just trying to
amazing. I love it.
Share information. And it's information that I sure wish somebody would have said to me, because I did not deal with it. I did not cope with it. And I just think now I am at the best place I've ever been with my mental health, because I can talk about these things and know that I don't know that I'm not being judged like I used to be. I just feel like having an autistic child, I used to be judged. Somehow I was to blame for that,
And you're essentially, building your tribe, you're building your community by talking about it and attracting people to you who, want to and need to hear your messages. And essentially you talking about it is creating this network of support.
And that's why I say, how grateful are we that we live in the digital age? As crazy as it is, and there are a lot of negatives because this is highly addictive, and I mean, we can go that way too. But I'm just saying, had I had the kind of support from complete strangers, caring, loving, authentic strangers who wanted to help on social media, I would be in a different, I would have been in a much different place in my life. So I'm honored when parents, message me, on Instagram or DM me or whatever and say, thank you. You have, I needed to hear that today, or you've changed my whole perspective. And I'm like, that's clearly, what I'm put on this planet to do. I mean, I love to talk. Clearly, we're supposed to be done 10 minutes ago. And so I absolutely feel like I have a message now. And so I'm grateful that people care to listen. So
that's right there with the intrinsic motivation, right? Because it's creating that sense of meaning and purpose.
Yeah.
The other thing too is that you had mentioned that early on you had saw a certain type of approach that was based on compliance, and you said, nope, something's not sitting right.
Isn't that crazy?
And that's what's remarkable about you, Cari, is that you're able to have already had this knowledge or this skill or this insight with a different lens already. And then you took that through your journey, you created content and changing the world. And that's just freaking awesome.
You're doing all these incredible things, but we are just so grateful you were here. We love you so much.
Oh, I love you guys so much. And
you're the best. Hey, Cari, before we wrap it up, can you share with the audience, with our viewers, where they can find you, anything that's upcoming, all that good stuff, social media, website?
Yeah. I mean, CariEbertSeminars.com is my website. We're doing we just hired a company, so it'll be a whole new website very soon. So we're excited about that. On Instagram, my handle is Cari Ebert Seminars. So it's Cari is my first name, Cari, it's spelled kind of weird. And then Ebert, like Siskel and Ebert. So it cross post to Facebook. I don't get much on Facebook much. I'm more of an Insta girl. So, but yeah, I'd say that those are the best places to find me and to follow me. And I have my new podcast, which they are just short snippets, 15 to 30 minutes. They're just me and my husband actually talking. So it's very, very cool. It's called SLP Talk Show. So it's on all the, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to, Spotify, whatever. And I don't do interviews on our podcast. It's literally just me talking, and Jim, he's my color guy. So yeah, we have a lot of fun. I
feel like I'm like such a stalker because I know so much about your family now.
It's kind of fun. And I made sure, to ask my 3 kids, is it okay if I share stuff? And they're like, if it helps other families, Mom, and Aaron is like, he loves wild animals. So we do wild animal posts when he's in the mood, and he'll come up to me randomly and be like, Mom, I need to teach your people about the peregrine falcon, so he calls all you guys my people. He's like, I need to teach your people about, so he knows people always say, is it okay that you're posting about Aaron? I'm like, I always show him every post before I post it. And I make sure especially if there's a picture, and he's always like, yeah, that one's okay. So I think it is important to be respectful, of our children and make sure that they are okay with it. But my whole family, we are in this together, and it is to build autism awareness, not just on April 2nd, because that's coming, people. April 2nd is one of 365 days. So April 2nd, to me, I stay off social media on that day. I'm not interested. Let the people who only talk about autism once a year do their thing. And then we'll go back to autism acceptance, not autism awareness. We need acceptance too. And so it's something that all of us, are doing. Those of us who are quite active on social media and who are neurodiversity affirming, really trying to, just keep the message out there that we're not going away. You can yell at me and you can say, I've had to get thick skin. People are not nice sometimes,
They sure are not.
I know you and I have had that conversation in the past. It's like sometimes that when you have a certain thing that the status quo has been so used to, and new ideas or concepts come in, they sure do like to target you, but but it's coming from an understanding of, hey, we're in the evolutionary phase of making changes. And
that's right. And how awesome is that we're part of this neurodiversity movement? I mean, I feel so honored that I get to be a part of it professionally and personally. And Maya Angelou's quote, I mean, I don't know it exactly, but it's something that I say all the time. You know better, you do better. So don't tell me this is how we always did it, or whatever is evidence-based, or this is the recommendation. Oh, no, 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 no. We're listening to the true autism experts now. And the true autism experts are actually autistic voices. We're done listening to self-proclaimed allistic or non-autistic autism experts. And that's why I would never call myself an autism expert. I specialize in autism at work, which means I attend every continuing education course I can about autism. I read everything I can about autism, but I am not an expert because I don't have the lived experience. So everything that I proclaim about autism is actually coming from actually autistic voices. And so I think that's why it's important to make sure we don't call ourselves autism experts, right? Because
Yeah, absolutely.
Glad you bring that up.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, yeah, just gaining insight from those lived experiences from the autistic community is just,
it's life-changing.
Yeah.
You know, it was funny, just to kind of wrap it up, but I wanted to also mention that I had made a post and someone had commented, well, where's all the research? And then an autistic person had said, hey, so this is my experience. And they're like, but I need the research. It's like, that is your evidence. Like listening to this person tell you is your evidence.
That's exactly right. And that's why I'm baffled when people are like, I don't know, everything from Gestalt language processing. I'm like, for my whole career, I wondered why I couldn't help autistic kids acquire language. And it's because I was using the, traditional approach, right? For neurotypical, the way neurotypical kids acquire language. Sorry, autistic kids don't acquire language the same way. That's been made very clear through my own lived experience as a parent, And so it's just, I'm getting tired of the whole, well, show me the research behind neurodiversity affirming practices. And I'm like, does mental health matter? Because if it does, we have plenty, so it is just important that we are focusing on the true autism experts and learning from them. And that's what I continue to do. And I know you guys do too.
Yeah, absolutely. Just because something's effective doesn't mean it's ethical. That's really important to remember.
Isn't that the truth?
Yeah.
Some night we can have wine and we can get into that more, but
We're hanging out. Bottles of wine.
Bottles of wine after the baby.
Then wine.
After the baby, then we have wine and we get down to business. Now, you guys, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Cari.
Post all the links you mentioned too below so that everyone can catch all of those and find you on social as well.
Yeah, we appreciate it, Cari.
Until
Until next time,
guys.
be cool and stay awesome.
Yes, you too. Bye, guys. We'll see you later.
Bye.